right, I am in Vermont right now, and I'm going to read chapter 11 of One Voice with William Wilberforce. April 2nd, 1792. Make sure you're looking at your question sheet. You should have 4 questions for chapter 11. For the third time in 4 years, I propose a bill to this House of Commons to abolish the slave trade. I have with me 499 petitions, almost 1 million signatures of people who request we abolish the slave trade. Look to the continent of Africa, and there you behold such a scene of horrors no tongue can express, no imagination can imagine. In Opposition by James Braille. We may have only 5 petitions to counter Mr. Wilberforce's. But be practical, sir. Jamaica has 16 blacks for every white. Should the Saint Domingue rebellion repeat, how would these loyal white subjects remain safe? Freedom, liberty, reform. Such fine-sounding words hide a dark reality. Look to France if you do not believe, and think of the practical consequences. Hundreds of ships idle, millions of people idle, crews, dock workers, shipbuilders, factory workers. Reform elsewhere means poverty at home. So we don't want to end this right away because people will be without jobs and they'll be sitting there and we'll have all these people that won't have money, and that's going to cause a lot of problems. Regulate by Henry Dundas. I fully agree with the goals Mr. Wilberforce has laid before us. However, I propose, sir, achieving the same end by regulating the trade rather than abolishing it outright. Proposal by Henry Dundas. Breed the enslaved in the West Indies to decrease the need for new bodies and thus limit demand. So in other words, instead of bringing over new slaves, let's just have the slaves that are there breed and have children that can then be slaves. Gradually end hereditary slavery so the enslaved will have hope they will not be enslaved forever. Improve the current conditions to stop the worst abuses and make us all feel better. Begin to educate the next generation of enslaved so they will have skills required to live free and not be released with no abilities to fend for themselves. So Henry Dundas is suggesting that they should end the slave trade gradually, okay? So we'll start to do it slowly. And the idea was that it would ease the transition for all involved. But in fact, what it was going to do is just make them still not make a decision about the slave trade. And that's what this chapter is called, Gradually by Henry Dundas. Add the word gradually before to be abolished. I think we can all agree that the slave trade ought gradually to be abolished. Thus, through moderation, we can avoid unpleasant consequences. So why did some members of parliament want to outlaw the slave trade gradually? So they said it would ease the transition, but really it just allowed them to make no big decision about it. Outraged by Charles Fox. The idea of moderation in the slave trade reminds me of Middleton's comment. To break open a man's house and kill him, his wife, and his family in the night is certainly a heinous crime, but even this may be done with moderation. Moderation in atrocity, in robbery and murder is the pillage and destruction of a country. The real question is not whether that execrable trade requires regulation, but whether it is fit to be continued at all. It seems to me, sir, that in the scheme proposed, something like a foundation is being laid for preserving this trade, not only for years to come, but for forever. Bill to abolish the slave trade gradually. It passed April 3rd, 1792, 230 to 85, saying let's abolish it gradually. Hollow Victory by William Wilberforce. The House of Commons implies the slave trade is wrong, but does nothing about it. Gradually means not really, not ever. So they're saying gradually, but are they really going to make any differences? Bill to abolish the slave trade gradually, House of Lords, never voted on, no trade. Bill died of neglect, as the enslaved continued to do. Unkind by James Boswell, a famous critic of speech and literature. Go, Wilberforce, with narrow skull, go home and preach away at Hull. Remember, that's where he lived. No longer to the Senate cackle in strains that suit the tabernacle. I hate your little whittling sneer, your pert and self-sufficient leer. Mischief to trade sits on your lip. Insects will gnaw the noblest ship. Go, Wilberforce, be gone for shame, thou dwarf with big resounding name. Murder by William Wilberforce. Slave ship captain Rollestone muddled some answers during debate. Members of Parliament laughed. Nettled, he challenged me to a duel. Remember, a duel is like where you take guns or swords, either one, and you fight. I refused. Upper class murder is still murder. Slave ship captain Kimber flogged a girl to death on ship deck. Expose, he demanded public apology. 5,000 pounds, a good government position. I refused. He harasses me in the street, stalks me at night. Is murder on his mind? On my friend's urging by William Wilberforce. 2 protections when I go out. Myself armed with a gun, my bodyguard at the ready. So what were some of the hardships faced by Wilberforce? He was actually in danger, right? I mean, his life was in danger. A famous poet wrote a very unkind poem. He was challenged to a duel and stalked at night, so he had to have a bodyguard with him. So those were some of the hardships, and we're going to hear about a few more. Revolution. August 10, 1792, French revolutionaries stormed the palace. January 21, 1793, French King Louis XVI was executed. February the 1st, 1793, French government declares war on Great Britain. February 26, 1793, the House of Commons rejects the gradual abolition bill it had passed the year before. Revolution changes the political landscape. So now they even took back what they'd done with that bill. Human Rights by William Wilberforce. If you speak of human rights, people suspect you are on the side of French revolutionaries, an enemy of King George, England, rule of law. The French revolutionaries were basically trying to stop all the French wealth and the privilege among the elite in France. The poor people were really struggling, and the French rich were doing really well, and so there was a revolution. In Every Season by William Wilberforce. In every small question of politics, there appears to me room to consider the time and the seasons, sometimes to push, sometimes to wait. But where a real moral evil is in question, a man who fears God is not at liberty. Even if I thought that the immediate abolition of the slave trade would cause an insurrection in our islands, I should not for an instant stop my endeavors. Be persuaded then that if I would not stop because of insurrection, I shall even less sacrifice this grand cause to motives of political convenience or personal feelings. May 1793, William says, I try a new tactic. Propose a bill to prohibit British ships from bringing the enslaved into foreign territories. And this is called the Foreign Slave Bill. For the first time, slave traders versus plantation owners. Slave traders, no restrictions, vote no. Plantation owners, if slave ships can't sell elsewhere, greater supply to us will drop the price, vote yes. Foreign Slave Trade Bill, 1793, rejected by 2 votes, so close, but still defeat. Foreign Slave Trade Bill 1 year later, 1794, passed. House of Commons by 18 votes. House of Lords never voted. Defeat. Oh man, don't you just feel for him? Either or, this is by the Duke of Clarence. The promoters of abolition are either fanatics or hypocrites. I'm looking at you, Wilberforce. A Time to Keep Silence by Thomas Clarkson. When we met in 1787, I had already been fighting 7 years. Now, remember, this was the guy that kind of encouraged him to go into the fight. Now, 7 years later, still nothing to show. For 14 years, 35,000 miles on rough roads, death threats, insults, personal attacks, thousands of pages of testimony, all the hours invested, all the horrors recounted, exhausted, defeated, I'm done. So Thomas Clarkson is going to just quit just says, I'm just done. That's another thing that one of the hardships that Wilberforce faced in that question there. Skullduggery. At long last, in spring 1796, I proposed another bill for debate. All was going well until the night of the final vote. That old nemesis, Henry Dundas, of gradual fame, gifted 6 or 7 supporters with free tickets to the Two Hunchbacks opera. Motion defeated 70 to 74. The abomination will continue at least one more year. So he gave unbelievable. He gave free tickets to an opera to some people who were going to support the bill, so they never got to vote. Unbelievable. Oh, so frustrating. Love Struck by William Wilberforce. In my 37 years, I've had attractions enough, but no enticement to marry. Until today, April 15, when I meet Barbara Spooner, age 20, recently turned Methodist. Beautiful, respectful to her parents, she leaves me tongue-tied. Gossip around Bath, various voices. Have you seen how that confirmed batcher Wilberforce watches Miss Barbara Spooner? Oh, more than watches. He's visited at her home several times. And I've seen them talking together at the pump room. How will this unfold? Let's watch and see. A letter from Wilberforce. My dear Miss Spooner, though I've only known you 8 days, I ardently hope you will do me the honor of accepting my suit. Will you marry me? I eagerly await your reply. The reply was yes. Political climate. Napoleon advances across Europe, abolishing the slave trade may affect the British economy or appear to give power to the people. Abolition is not a popular idea. Another year, another bill to abolish the slave trade. May 1797, rejected, 74 to 82. A Wedding and a Methodist by William Wilberforce. Two great joys. May 30th, 1797. I wed Barbara. On our honeymoon tour, I find my mother turned Methodist. If God could so work that should change her religion, if God could so work that she should change her religion, he could so work that we could change our law. She is free in Christ. May the Africans be free in body soon. So he's like, man, if my mom can become a Methodist, we can abolish slavery. A New Neighbor by William Wilberforce. James Stephen, St. Kitts lawyer, abolitionist, now widowed with 6 small children, moved nearby. He will continue to help the cause. Another year, another bill to abolish the slave trade. 1798, rejected. 83-87. The Flower Fades by William Wilberforce. Like daffodils, my bills pop up every spring, only to fade and die before summer. 1799, rejected again, 54-84. Near January 1st, 1800, a member of Parliament joked with me, perhaps this will be the century you finally get your slave bill passed. Please, God, let it be. We're in a new century, 1800. So that's the end of chapter 11. How long did Wilberforce know his wife before he proposed to her? 8 days. They were 17 years apart in age. And what happy thing happened during his honeymoon? His mom became a Christian. Super exciting. So that was chapter 11 of William Wilberforce.